I was doing group therapy as well as griefshare.org. Awesome, tremendous program. And then I did individual therapy with a grief therapist. And that allowed me, what I will say is I really leaned in to that. People will say, you always hear people talk about A-type personalities, but you never hear about a B or a C. So, I've tried to stop kind of using that, but I am an all-in kind of person. And so I was all into the therapy. If I say yes to something, I'm all in.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. So welcome back to another episode of Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited today to have Marquita Miller Joshua with us, who is founder and CEO of an accounting firm as well as a widows support group in Kansas City. So I'm really excited to have you here. Really enjoyed our pre-conversation, Marquita, and most welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so very much. I'm excited to be back. We had such a great conversation. So I was looking forward to continuing it today.
Awesome. Yes, we did. So I'm going to jump right in. The question that I always start with is, what for you was one of the most meaningful transitions that happened in your life or that you went through in your life, whether it's meaningful, deep, difficult, purposeful, whatever comes up for you? What would you put in that as a really meaningful or profound transition for your life, Marquita?
Absolutely. So it definitely would have to be something that was difficult, but it also turned out to be very meaningful, which was the transition of my late husband. I was previously married 23 years, and he unexpectedly passed in 2017. And that did set and has continued to set the course of my journey forward. And so it definitely would be the one that I would point out and recognize.
And what you said, it was definitely difficult, but it also set your trajectory. So
yeah.
How did it set your trajectory? Like, what has it changed in your life, or what did you learn from it that has really changed the trajectory of your life?
Well, being in that place when that happened and thinking, how do I continue to move forward when the life that I knew that was built and was moving forward with this person that was no longer being the natural journeying with me, and how did I navigate that? And in the beginning, it seemed very overwhelming, and it seemed almost a hurdle that I would not be able to jump over at all from the standpoint, and even to move beyond it. It was just so such just a big, hurtful and very odd place to be, and not knowing how to navigate. But I will say that after having time to sit with it and think about it, and then really get to understand that life is precious. And I gained that clearly because I've seen how quickly that, I woke up on a Sunday morning married. And by that evening on that Sunday night, I was no longer married and I was a widow.
Wow. And you had no idea when you woke up that morning that this would be happening that day.
No, we were planning on to go to the lake with the girls for Memorial Day.
Right.
And so had no clue. Plans had been made, right?
Wow.
And so it really allowed me to see that we continue to make plans. Everyone we're making plans. We're making plans for tonight. We're making plans for tomorrow, next week. But there are some realities that some will not realize those plans.
That's right. Wow. So that when you say suddenly, this was really suddenly. It wasn't unexpected to 1 week later. It was from one moment to the next.
One moment to the next. Yeah. Like I'm waiting on him to show up at church and he doesn't show up at church. And I get a phone call from him saying something's wrong and I rush home. And so that suddenly,
wow.
But it also allowed me to see that life is precious and that we don't have the benefit sometimes of not valuing the day, the hour, the moment. Because when I look back, I was like, wow, the last thing he said when I left from church is, I love you and I'll see you in a second. I mean, there could have been so many other last words. Married couples, listen, when you're on a Sunday morning trying to get to church and you're running, but there are lots of different last words there could have been. But I was just so grateful for that moment. But then it did really teach me that even in the midst of grief and the loss and feeling desperation and not knowing what I was going to do, that I too had to come face to face. Would I allow these next days and would I allow this event to steal from me twice? One, a spouse, and two, life, daily life. And so that really
Wow.
shaped my path forward.
I love that. Will I allow this to create two losses for me? I love that.
Yeah.
When did that, when did that come into your mind? When did God give you that
Yeah.
inspiration? Was it a month later? Was it an hour later? Was it a day later?
I really took the remainder of the month of May was a real tailspin. I didn't go back to work. I didn't. Was surrounded by a lot of family and friends and church members, but I will tell you because I also am a professional speaker. I had the most bookings for me to speak in the month of July,
Hmm.
and there were a few events that I had lined up that were later in May and June. And I remember having my team cancel everything for May and cancel everything for June. And I remember somebody saying, let's not cancel July. Let's just see where you're at. You
Hmm.
have time. So as that time was ticking to come towards that, once I got to June, and on the other side of the funeral, on the other side of people are back, they love you, and they're there to support you, but they are back to their lives. Your
Right.
life is happening here once again. Life is happening, and they
That's
love
right.
you and they value and they want to support you, but life is happening.
Yeah, and they're not
And so
stopping their life. They're not going to have a
nothing's
second
stopping. Not
suffering
work's
loss.
not stopping. Tuition's not. Nothing's
Right.
stopping. And so, in June, I said, well, actually, one of my youngest children actually said, because one of the things I talk about is no more excuses, only results.
Mm.
And so she said, so what's going to happen with July? That was your biggest, two largest events with largest crowds. And I said, I'm not sure. And she said, so is death an excuse? And I was like, oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, she drunk the Kool-Aid and now she's feeding me the Kool-Aid, right?
Wow.
So
It's a big testament to you as a mom, quite frankly, that they could be going through they're going through that with you. That's a huge loss for your
yes,
girls as well.
absolutely huge. And
And
so I had to sit with that for a moment when she asked me that, because in my mind, I initially thought it's a very good excuse
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
And it's one that will probably shape everything else. But after I sat with that for a few days and I was already in therapy and those kind of things, I thought, he would want me to do these events. And so I settled with, okay, first saying yes, that I was going to do them,
right.
because I understood, what if I really became um, um, very sensitive to the fact that things are intentional, things are purposeful. Us being here today, the people that will listen to
Yeah,
this on this segment, it's very intentional, it's very purposeful. And so I thought, what if me saying no impacted somebody that was supposed to hear
yeah,
me?
block something that may have been part of the plan.
Yeah. And so I just first started saying, I had to first start with saying, yes, I would do it. That was really fueled by being sensitive to the fact that that day was a gift. What happened to him? It could have been me per se. I mean, yes, there were health challenges, but I had my own set of health challenges.
Right.
I'm like, it could have been me. So let me value the life by moving forward, not moving on, but moving forward,
Mhm.
and figuring out how to do that despite of, as we've all have all heard, in spite of fear, right?
Right.
It's one thing to want to say yes. It's one thing to have a desire to say yes, but then it's another thing to take the steps forward to say
Right.
yes.
Yeah, to feel I always say to feel the fear and to do it anyway, right? Nobody
Yes,
doesn't feel the fear, but to feel the fear and do it anyway,
yes,
right? I mean, I've not been through that, and how do you honor
yeah.
your grief and saying yes to life? And, like, how did you find that balance? And I mean,
Hmm.
obviously from the little bit I've talked to you ahead of time, you're in a very good space today, right? And you
Yes.
obviously didn't let that loss define you, right? And even the two last names I love. So you're still
Hmm.
honoring first
Yes.
husband
Yes.
and your second husband, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Um, but how did you, in the moment, how did you find that? Because you talked about, okay, your daughter helped you to move on to
Yeah.
start saying yes again. But I don't want people to think too that it's also not okay to grieve or to go into a
Right.
cave for a little while,
Hmm.
because it is okay. But where's that balance? And where's that
Yeah.
transition point?
One of the things when my late husband passed away, is I reached out to other widows that I knew that had experienced the loss, and I wasn't in a position where I could talk to them just yet by phone, but I used the power of text messaging and play because I just wasn't strong enough to have those conversations and not have breakdowns, which is nothing wrong with those
Right.
breakdowns, but I felt more safe texting. And I
Mhm.
remember asking them the same questions. What would you do differently? What did you do that you say was very helpful? And
Mm,
what would you tell me after you've walked through this that you would know
mm,
that it would do? And all
mm,
of them said therapy, therapy,
mm.
therapy, and therapy. And so I was in therapy I want to say by end of May, to be very honest. I was in
And
therapy. I
Memorial
did,
Day is already almost the end of May, so maybe
yeah,
1 week later.
yeah. And so I was doing group therapy as well as through griefshare.org. Awesome, tremendous program.
Mm,
And then I did individual therapy with a grief therapist. And that allowed me, what I will say is I really leaned in to that. I did not I mean, people will say, you always hear people talk about A-type personalities, but you never hear about a B or a C. So,
right.
I've tried to stop kind of using that, but I am an all-in kind of person. And so I was all into the therapy. If I say yes to something, I'm all in. That's
Yeah,
just
you're gonna
my
get as
personality.
much as you can out of it, not tiptoe in, but
Yeah, nope, I
yeah.
jump all the way in. And so I really leaned into those processes. I also did not allow myself to say I was okay when I wasn't okay.
How did you give yourself permission for that? Because I think that's something that's not very normal in this country. So
It's
how did
not.
you give yourself permission to that?
I am really grateful to the people that were around me, supportive office employees and church members and friends and families. But I knew it would be very easy for me to jump back into the day to day and be like, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm great," and just absorb myself and absorb and suppress the grief
Right, to get
by
use
work.
busyness as a drug
Yes,
to
yes,
not feel, right?
yes.
Which is the heart of all addiction, right?
Absolutely. But one of the things that a friend of mine reached out to me, who's a therapist that was in Atlanta, and she said, do not suppress this because you will cause this to be delayed and it
Mm,
will linger
mm,
for longer than you need it to linger. And I remember her words as I read them off from the text because I was still texting.
right,
As I
right.
read them from the screen on the text, I thought, wow, that was kind of my plan. I
Mhm,
mean, she just kind of
mhm,
blew up my plan. And so, in the midst of that, I really did do the work.
right.
And then also, I felt like there was a responsibility that I have to not allow people to think that I just was, like one day here grieving, the next day just popped down like a, I didn't want that to be the case. And so I really believe that God gave me the mission to display my process. And so what I did is I remember doing a Facebook Live probably in June.
Oh, really
Yeah,
quick.
I did a Facebook Live because many people were calling and texting and wanting to know, how are you? What's going on? What can we do for you? So that solved two things. One, I was not going to be able to call all those people back, and I felt I'm a people person, and you reach out to me, I'm going to reach out to you back typically.
Right.
And so that allowed me to allow them to see where I was at, but then also allowed me to really show up um, and it was the beginning of me actually being able to say yes to the next thing because I was like, you know what? If I can't show up among this group, then
Right.
how am I going to show up on a stage with thousands of people that I don't know and that don't have a sensitivity for what I've been
Right.
through? So I did that Facebook Live and I just really shared about the therapy and from a high level view where my girls were, my kids, what they were going through, because I do believe you let others tell their story. So from my viewpoint, and then where I was at, and how and there were times I had to stop and I had my little breakdown and I just said, I'm giving myself permission to have this because this is what happened, what is part of this process. And I just, when I walked through that, it was the messages I got back from people. um, in the African American community, therapy has not been, it's gotten a lot more popular now,
But
but
still take stigmatized.
it was a very much a taboo with it. And so
Mm,
when I talked about that, the messages that started pouring in with what did you do in the therapy? And do they
mm,
think that, do you think you're like mentally slipping? And I mean, these questions. And so I started fielding these questions and I thought, wow, this has opened up a place for people to actually consider. And I started referring the therapist, and she was like, whoa, what is going on with all these people calling? And so I noticed from that, I was like, well, maybe this is, part of this, that I use my situation is initially what I thought to expose what I'm doing, and the books that I'm reading and the homework that I'm doing from the sessions. And is initially what I thought. But as I begin to talk more about it and visit with people, and it wasn't necessarily that they had lost, grief comes in all kind of situations,
Sure,
right?
sure.
From divorce and all kind of things that can happen, loss of a job,
Yeah,
just whatever, any
even
loss.
or any sense of a loss, right?
Yes,
I mean, even like
absolutely.
I was recently like, what's my sadness about? And it was about accumulated childhood thing of just not
Mm,
having it the way that I wanted, right?
yes,
And I'm 52,
absolutely.
right? So there's a lot of places it can come from for
They can
sure.
come from. And so many of them getting from just feeling like they had permission to go talk to another person who didn't know, had any content, and they would get resolution, and they would listen to me to say, do you feel better after you talk to them? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I had strategies of how to navigate the things. And so
Right.
from those conversations, I started feeling healing happening for me. And so I was like, wow, God, okay, so it's I share, healing manifest. And so once I'm not the sharpest, but I catch on quickly. And so I was like, well, if I keep sharing, this healing keeps manifesting. There's like a cause and effect that's happening here. And it was so
That's
true.
really great to recognize that. I think that's I'm in a 12-step recovery, and step 12 is all about that,
Mm,
right? That
wow.
it's try to, bring this to other people that are still suffering and practice these principles in all my affairs. And why do you do that? It's not for the help of the other people, of course. That's
Hmm.
nice, but it's because the healing manifests
Yes.
in myself when I
Yeah,
do that.
every time I would share about the sessions. Then eventually, I was invited to a radio show, and I was kind of real reluctant, but I felt like that between the therapy and the sharing with others, I was getting a little bit stronger. And I
Right.
got on the radio show, and it was the first time that someone had hit me with a springer. Because she didn't tell me that she was going to talk about that at all. She wanted to talk about business, what I normally talk about.
Oh,
And so when she spent that, and she was like, so tell me about the day that event happened. I was like, whoa. And so I had to pull on the strategies that I'd been given, certainly God. And I did give myself permission to say, I will share that it was a loss, but I'm not in a position, and I don't feel like I'm ready for the step to share the details of that day.
right,
And because I know there are others that are watching, and my children could be, I haven't talked with them about that. That's not where I'm at. So I totally gave my position, and I'm not that person.
good
I'd
for
have been like,
you.
well, you pushed me here, so I got to go. And I
Yeah,
was
no,
so
good
proud
for
of
you for
myself.
not giving in to gotcha journalism, right? That's not
Yeah.
what it's
And so
about.
I was so proud of myself that I didn't lean from that. And then it told me, wow, you don't have to answer the hard questions.
Yeah,
If something comes up, you can just say, not at this moment. So
right,
it seems like a simple thing, but it was such a major thing for me to know. One, healing was manifesting. I was sharing my story more with people about managing grief and coping, and walking through as a widow. And now other widows were calling me, and
right,
I'm having these dialogues. I'm on phone now, I'm back to phone calls.
right, right,
And then I realized, wow, if I get hit with a hard question, I don't have to say anything about it.
right.
So that's what helped me to get back on stage, if you will, back to TV segments that I were doing, to begin to normalize. But certainly taking everything that I had experienced, I packaged that and walked with it with me, and really begin to value time in a much more significant way.
So if I listen that through it, I'm just going to try to distill what I heard. First was that you reached out to others that have been through it, right?
Yes.
When you were really lost, you reached out to other widows. And then second, and I heard this so many times, I gave myself permission. I gave myself permission to have grief. I gave myself permission to use only text in the beginning. I gave myself permission to not answer the hard questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing because I mean, it seems sort of simple and obvious, but as you had
Right.
all this excitement about giving myself permission to not answer the hard question, like so many of us don't give ourselves permission. We
We
don't give
don't.
ourselves permission for almost anything. We're
Right.
busy doing what we think we should do and pleasing others and whatever that is. So I think that's beautiful. Like I gave myself permission. And then the third is that the service heals as well,
Yes,
right?
it
That this
really
connection
does.
of when I gave myself permission to start interacting again because I felt strong enough, doesn't have to be right away. That when I
Yeah.
did that, my service also helped to heal me, my being of service to others and answering their questions and so forth, and giving myself permission which questions I'll answer and which ones I won't, right? The permission
Yeah.
was running there the whole time, but first reaching out to others, which of course they're doing a service to you in the beginning,
Hmm.
right? To get it started, to prime the pump, and then giving yourself permission to interact in whatever ways felt healthy and safe
Hmm.
for you,
Yeah.
even if they're a little bit scary, as we talked about, and then being of service and seeing
Yeah.
that that helps others, but it also helps you. Are there
Hmm.
other keys that you would say for someone going through a heavy grief that you would like to share?
Um, in that going in the vein of permission, it's so funny how you picked that out because I just previously just hosted a widows event for some ladies from Valentine's.
Tell
And
us a little bit about that, because you have a lot of energy about that when we talked before, and I'd love to
yeah,
hear, like, what is it like, and what are some of the people that are coming, and how many people have come, and like
yeah.
what's that like?
And I had no idea in that, and we'll share about that. I had no idea in that I would literally, as I was talking with them, say, I had them repeat after me that they give themselves permission to have joy.
Wow,
And oh my gosh, the joy that erupted in that place. I mean,
wow,
it was day and night from when they came in and how they left. But this permission thing that you've kind of identified, I'm grabbed because I'm like, whoa, I that's how we ended that event was for permission for them to have joy. And so to
and probably a
allow
lot of
them,
them hadn't given themselves permission since their spouse had passed.
absolutely not. And even to the sense, and I said that to them because I remember being very fresh in that first year. And I remember one time when I started laughing and having a good time somewhere, and I was like, whoa, I'm not supposed to be laughing.
All right, I'm
My
supposed
late husband passed. I can't laugh. What is this? Is this fun? And it
wow,
seems really weird, but I was like, oh wow, no, I'm supposed to be mourning still. I can't be having fun.
right,
And
right.
so at that event, I realized I remembered that and said that. And then so you kind of brought me back to that place. But you find those indifference because you start framing what others think you should be acting like, you should be doing, and where you should go. And so you do in your grief. I think it's one of the times you have to love yourself
Mm,
first.
mm.
Love yourself first because that's going to be so important in those year one because you have to love yourself enough to say, I don't want to do Christmas like we did Christmas last year.
Right, right,
I
yeah,
just want to pack up my children and we're going to go on a trip. Nope,
right,
I don't want to put up the Christmas tree because he always put up the Christmas tree.
right, right. It's
I
too
don't.
much right now.
It's
Give
too much
yourself
right now.
permission to acknowledge that that's too much and just let it be.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then to family gatherings and to say, if people are at your home, I need to go lay down now. And so
right.
in loving yourself, you really do in that process, you really get in tune of, I think it's important, at least it was for me from the standpoint to really understand what do you need in that moment and how do you need people to show up for you because they really
Mm,
do care and they
mhm.
think they're showing up in the best method, but you have to say if that's not the way that you need them to show up for you, if that's
Right,
not helpful for the way they need to show up. And so
right.
it weaves its being through from that standpoint. And so I think those have been some of the things that I've been able to transfer into the event and share with other widows to really help them from the standpoint. But yeah, our event was dynamo. It was dynamo. They always come in. We have it at a local restaurant that's in a very high end of town on the plaza in Kansas City. And
Mhm.
the event, actually, the restaurant owner was there to do our event.
Oh, nice.
Yes, he was actually there. Normally doesn't work, and he just was in there. And he said, "Every year I've watched you come in here since 2018." And these ladies walk in and they're kind of like really hesitant and somber and not sure. He said, and by the end of it, I think you guys are having a party. He said, and I'm like, how does that happen? And it comes with the permission. I mean, I'm so glad
Mm,
you pointed that out. I'm
mm.
grabbing that from this segment and our time together of that. It comes with it. And so it was, I mean, they were dancing and singing. And so it was great. And so I think that when you do give yourself permission on the front end in loss and grief to do that work, that I think then you should give yourself permission also for happiness, for joy.
Yeah, to start living again.
I
Yeah,
got remarried,
yeah,
so I had to at
absolutely.
some point give myself permission to love again, to
Yeah.
dream again, to build again, to expand, and to move forward.
Absolutely, and I think that's a way of also honoring, the loss as well. Like,
It,
the person that you've lost would not want you to continue to
no,
loss for too
they
long,
wouldn't. Yeah.
right? They
Hmm.
would want you to live just like you would want that for them, right?
Absolutely. And there are some I was in just in the conversation I had with some of the widows, some will remarry and you give yourself, if that's a desire, give yourself permission for that. But then there are some that say, I don't want that. And
Right.
what I've said over and over again, because a lot of times people think that I push the whole remarriage thing, and I'm like, no, I am only pushing, do what you want to do what you
Right.
love to do, be led by God, and
Yeah.
don't allow this to alter the rest of your life so that you pay a price twice.
Right.
And so if in your heart you say you don't want to be remarried, I always just challenge, make sure that that's not coming from a place of fear.
Right.
But if that's really a desire, then give yourself permission to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. No, it's a great thing that you're doing and being a light for so many people that maybe haven't given themselves permission to experience much light, since they've
And
lost their
it
husband.
certainly, people give you the kudos and the love and the support for doing it. But I will tell you, I gained so much from it myself from doing it. It's a driving force that, people have said, why do you do this year after year? You're remarried. You don't have to do this. No, if you only knew the healing that continues to heal, then it's my gift to myself a little bit, to be honest. And they're the benefactors of it.
Right.
But it is such a joy in healing. And every year I get to see how much more I healed. And oh, wow, God, look at what you did. I could have never told that story. And I'm telling this story now. And,
Right.
I'm years down the road.
So I've added a fourth one to the three summaries, which is love yourself. And I want to ask you, and I think it's what I've noticed with my wife, right? Especially for women, it seems it's more difficult to give yourself permission to take care of yourself and love yourself, right?
Yes.
It
Because
seems
we're
more difficult.
caretakers. We'd love to take
Yeah, and
care
you're
of
taking care of everybody
everybody
else
else.
and not yourself. And so I wonder, how do you get that message across? Like, what do what tools do you use, or how do you get that message across? I mean, to anybody, but especially
Yeah.
to women that maybe don't feel like they're allowed to love themselves or take care of themselves. How did you make that? How did you give them permission? What about you allowed them to manifest that permission to take care of
Mhm.
themselves and love themselves?
So it really was so fueled off of my why. And I had to identify my why. And I remember thinking early on, when everything happened in May, I was like, wow, this is too big. And I heard the enemy speaking to me saying, you know, you need to check out of this. You can't navigate this. This is way too big for you. And I remember saying, I have to find my why.
Mm,
And the thing that was my why before my late husband passed couldn't be my when, I mean, some of it could be, but it was a little bit
right. This is
different.
going to be different. Yeah.
But my why became my children. So we were a blended family, and my late husband had two children before we got married, and their mom had passed. So now I was
Mm.
faced with, I'm all these two have,
Oh, yeah.
and then the children that we had together, I'm all this two have. So there's four people that I am literally outside of Christ. I'm what they've got.
Right.
And so
Right.
my why became of twofold. I don't want them to experience another loss. And then the other why became,
And when
I
you say that, you don't want them to experience another loss. I mean, that could be
mm,
anything from you actually becoming so depressed or something that you died, all the
absolutely.
way to just not living fully, where you're not taking care of them and interacting with them and helping them have a good life, so that they're lost. Even if you're still alive, they've lost having a mother, if you will.
Yes, and it was actually the first of that part. It was the first for me that I knew that it was this grief was so heavy
Mhm.
that I started reading things because I'm now, and even when I couldn't sleep, and a lot of
Right?
widows and
Couldn't sleep,
widowers
didn't want to talk to
experience.
people. You can
Yeah,
text and read, right?
I'm not, so I'm reading things, and I started reading about heartbreak syndrome, and it was a real thing. And they were talking about how many spouses pass away very soon after the loss of spouse. And I was like, whoa, this is really weird. And I don't want to die from this.
Right?
Yes, he was my world, but God's given me the day. God's
Yes.
given me the next moment.
Yeah.
And I have to
And these
honor
four
God.
younger people that you're
And
responsible
yes,
for.
and these four people that have to. And so I didn't want them to have to experience that. And I knew I had to shift. And so that I could try to be okay to help them. So the only way I could do that was to be all in on me first. Because,
Mm.
we're on a plane, we're here. Put your mask on first before you. So you can't help,
So how
as
did
much
you
as,
know that? Because that's the part that a lot of people don't get. You made that in one quick sentence, but a lot of
yeah.
people don't get that. The only way to be all in is to be about me first.
Yes.
Like, where did that realization come for you, and how do you share that with others?
It really came from as my kids were having triggering moments and grief moments. When you're a parent, you want to fix it for them.
Oh yeah.
But I realized some of the questions that they had were the same questions I had. Some of the
Mm.
angers that they were feeling was the same anger I was feeling. And so you can't help someone when you're feeling the same thing. So I said, okay, they're refusing to go to therapy. I'm going to therapy. I've got to get, if I can get a baby step in front of them that I can turn around and say, listen,
There
here's
you go.
strategy.
Okay.
And so to do that was me saying yes to what would improve me, what would help me to heal, what would give me guidance so that I can then be strong enough to help them in a moment.
So you transposed this. Yes, I'm here to serve and help others,
Yes.
but I can't do it unless I take care of myself.
Unless I take care of myself.
And
Yes.
so it was like a lot of people go to, oh, I feel selfish if I'm taking care of myself. But you're like, I
Right.
can't serve
I can't
unless I
serve.
have something. And I love that. Like, if you boil Christianity down to one thing in Matthew from Jesus, right? It
Yeah.
says, love God.
Yes.
And then in the Eugene Patterson version, the version I really like, the modern English says, and then love others, not love your neighbor, but love others, maybe even love your enemy. But
Mm.
how? As you love yourself.
As you
So
love
it's
yourself.
actually love God, love yourself, love others. Because
Yes.
you can't love others, how do you love others? As you love yourself.
As you love yourself.
So if
Loving
you're not doing
yourself
a good
well.
job loving yourself, you can't do a good job loving others,
Yes.
right? So that
Yeah.
I
Oh,
love
that's
that.
so rich. That's so very rich there. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. That's so rich. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's no, that's great. And then you, because of being able to share stories like that about how you were taking care of your daughters, you realize you had to take care of yourself first. Is this what you feel like made it permission for these other women to be able to start to love on themselves, to take care of themselves?
Um, Absolutely. It gave, I would begin to say some of the things that came through my mind that um, are sometimes taboos, right? That are things that, people just don't say out loud. But I knew that I had heard them. I knew that I had felt them. I knew that I had thought those thoughts. And so in those environments, I'd start sharing people, whoa, like, she's saying that out loud. And I'm like, maybe it was just me, and then I discovered, oh no, it's not just me. They have
Never
felt
is.
the same thing. And so, and to this day, that's what we do. And even being remarried, I tell them, guess what? The I do doesn't heal you. The next I do doesn't heal you.
That's right.
If you don't do the work on the front end, you just probably, it can complicate it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. You can sabotage the next I do.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. So
Yeah. Wow. Good for you. Good for you. That's. I mean, it's. I would love that you've suffered, you've lost, and you found a way to work through it, and by
mhm,
taking care of yourself and taking care of those around you.
yes,
If you look back on that event now it's, if I got it right, that was 2017 or 2018.
2017, 2017, yeah.
So it's coming up on 7 years
No, coming up on, oh wow, we
now.
know seven's a big year.
Yes, we do. We do.
Seven means a lot of things, right?
It does. It does. If you looked back on how you handled that, I mean, to me, it sounds like you've handled it amazingly. But is there something, if you look back over those 7 years, is there something you would tell yourself right as that event happened? Is there something that you would do differently? Is there something you would like to tell that younger you 7 years ago?
Mhm. I'm glad I took the time, even though I didn't think I needed the time. I'm glad I took the time. It felt like I didn't go back to work for a very long time. It felt like, from the standpoint. So
But it
that
was
was
really like a month and a half or something. It was because you in July.
from speaking. But remember, I own the accounting firm, and I don't think I came back for that for probably like 3 months.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So probably about the same time. I had really grateful for the staff and the team and the employees that I had to be able to do that. But so the time was critical, taking the time,
Yeah.
not feeling the urge to just jump back in because people expect you to jump back in. The only other thing that I would add, thinking about, that's so really good, that I would add to that is probably being a little bit more vocal. And yeah, I feel like I was pretty vocal, but I definitely see where I could have been more vocal in really helping people to see the best way that I felt they could help me. Because there was a
Mm.
lot of things happening. I mean, from the day my late husband passed, I mean, my house became Grand Central Station. I couldn't tell you who was in the house when they was in the house. And I mean, it was just like overnight turning. And I mean, people were staying the night to stay with us. And it probably was not until August that started to kind of twiddle off a little
Wow.
bit. And I needed that, but that not everyone needs that.
Right.
But I will say that I there were things that were happening and statements that were being made by those around me that I, hindsight, should have said, I don't want you to discuss that. You were privy to that, but I felt like, oh, they need to tell their story. That's their story too.
Right.
And I think that I should have been vocal, much more vocal, to say, you sharing that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And then deep dive into what made me uncomfortable about it, because I remember they would, there would be people that would make, and they didn't really think they were doing anything wrong, but they would make statements. And then I think, well, I felt some kind of way about that. And I never really exposed that component. That would
Okay.
be the thing.
So to give yourself even more permission to ask for what you need, to put the boundaries that you need at this time, because everybody's there because they love you and they want to support you. But if they don't know how,
If they don't
and
know how. And
then
people only serve out of what they think is best.
right,
And sometimes I remember a lady came to my house probably a month after, and she's like, come on, you're going to cry today because I just need you to break down and cry. I think there's so many people in here and you're not. And I'm thinking, what is going on? I'm
right.
like,
That's your agenda. May not be my
yeah,
agenda.
that's your
Yeah.
agenda. And I'm like, no. And that was one time that I did have to tell her, I was like, no, you haven't been here to know what's happening, but there's been lots of that. But just
Right.
because I'm not crying in this moment that you've entered in,
Right.
it doesn't mean I have not cried. And
Right.
so, and again, that was her agenda. She slid in that one day of my world and thought she hadn't, like
Yeah.
this.
What's going to help you? And she's doing it with a good heart, but she's not
Good
listening.
heart, good heart. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, I know. I had a friend that lost a daughter, 20
Mm.
years old, and I mean, I don't know what to say. It's the same age as my kids, and I don't know what to do. But after everybody left, right when it was quiet, I would just go to his house and sit there on the back deck. I wouldn't say anything. I'd just say,
Yeah,
"Hey, I'm coming over," and he'd be like, "Okay," and then we just sit there and we wouldn't
yeah,
talk,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that later on, he said that really meant a lot. Things were quiet again, and life was back to normal for everybody else,
yes,
but not for him. And I didn't
no,
have any solutions. I didn't have any answers. I just felt for him, you know.
yeah,
So I think that's a great though to tell people more clearly how they can help you and how they're not helping. I think is
hmm,
because everybody, I mean, everybody wants to help, but they don't know how. They
they
can't
don't know
imagine
how.
going through it, and they don't know what that looks like. And I guess
Yeah,
the only piece I could say from that is just sometimes just being together without anything, without
that's
any
so true. I
accountability.
do feel like as a result of that experience that I'm a little bit more equipped when someone has a loss and and I don't say now, like, how are you doing? What do you
Yeah.
mean how are you
No.
doing? Well, and I remember getting those questions all the time. And so now my statement is, in this moment right now, how do you feel and what do you need is
Right.
typically what I lead with from the standpoint.
Right. Right.
um I have a friend who, she just lost, speaking of that, lost her son, 26 years old, just this week. And
Mm,
I never once asked what happened because I remember getting so tired of telling the what has happened story. I mean, it
right.
felt like it was, I wanted to say, I'm going to record this and I'm just play from here on
Right.
out. And I never once asked her what happened. I sent them lunch just two
Yeah.
days ago. It doesn't matter what happened. Her
Right.
son is still gone at 26 years old. So
Right.
whatever happened doesn't shape the fact of this loss. And
Right.
I think that people feel when we're not sure what to do, we feel that silence, especially women. I'll say sometimes I feel like we feel that silence with extra words. And there's
Right.
time, what you just said about just sitting there and not saying anything. Those were some of the best times I had of people in the house that were just, I'd look up and somebody was washing dishes and not saying a word. And I was like, this is wonderful. I mean, then there were
Right.
other times someone would come through and be like, okay, today's the day we're taking you to the bank and we're gonna get you out of this house. And I'm like, oh my God. Some
So
days
the
I
one thing
needed
I
that.
guess you would say is if someone's trying to help is to really ask, "Hey, what do you need today? What do you feel
What do
like
you
you
need
need
today?
today?"
And know that every day is not the same
Right.
day. I mean, that person may want to rest that day, but then that next day they may not want to. But I did, what I also value is I had people around me that knew me well enough that I could trust them, that if they felt I was not in a safe place, went too far, that they would pull my coattail to say, I think this is, kind of going a bit far here,
Right.
and because remember, I'm an all-in person. And so when
Yeah.
with the therapy, they were wanting me that the group therapy was wanting me to start leading sessions, and I'm an all-in person, right? And so they're like, we want you to take this back to your church and you can start a program. And it would have felt like the right thing to do, but it's like, no, I don't know that this is what I'm supposed. And I had a girlfriend saying, no, we're not leading any sessions. You're not the ambassador of grief
Right.
right now. You're still grieving.
Exactly. Let yourself go through your own process
Yes.
first. Yeah.
She's like, if you decide later, and that's going to be a year from now to do that, great.
Right.
But right now, you're not the leader of the widow group at your church, or you're
Right.
not the leader of the
Right.
grief group at your church. If they needed that program, they've got to figure that out.
Right.
But you're not going to be the one to
Yeah,
introduce
you're a
that.
member if there's one, but you're not the
Yes,
leader right now. And
yes, you're not the leader of that group.
that's loving yourself again,
Yes.
right? And recognizing what it takes that you need to build the foundation. No, that's amazing. I'm curious, and this is, it's a question I usually ask, and I'm not even sure if it fits here, but I'm gonna try it on, and feel free to bat it away if it doesn't. But if you hadn't had this transition in your life, this big change, where do you think your life would be today? And you could focus on either one. One, if it's, with still your husband was still around, or how you managed it afterward, which maybe is more fitting. But like, how do you think your life would be different if you hadn't taken a positive approach to this transition?
If I had not had taken let me say this, on the flip side of that, it has made me very sensitive to relationships, the time, the connection with people, the value of time.
When you say sensitive, what do you mean there?
Really pausing, like even knowing you. Why do we connect? I know we're doing this, but I know there's purpose in our connection. I would have the old me before now would have been like, okay, check, move on.
Right. Okay.
And that is just not how I sit with things from even our first time. I'm like, why do we meet now? What is it I'm supposed to? Because I understand that the value of time, Again, being a success driven, own an accounting firm and numbers, and we got to raise revenue, and we got to do this and start that, and we got to sell more books and sell more products. I'm still probably that girl to some degree,
right.
but I do it with a much more sensitivity of, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Does this bring me joy?
Yeah.
What part of this gives me stress? How do I remove that stress? So I asked a lot more questions of myself on this side of it, because I do really realize, man, life is precious. Yes. You and I woke up today.
Yep. And that's not a given. It's not a given.
That's not a given. I was at a parade yesterday because, it was Super Bowl for Kansas City.
Yeah. I forget you're in Kansas City. Back-to-back champs.
Yes. And so, but there were people who left that parade because of a terrible incident of a shooting that happened. I was at that parade.
Yeah.
I was at that parade with my employees. I mean, life is just, I don't want to say fragile, because when you think it's fragile, sometimes it makes you a little bit scared, but it's precious.
Right.
It's precious. And so are you doing the things that, after we've all heard people say, if you had a certain date that you knew you were going to transition and you're not going to be here beyond this date, what are the things that you would do?
Right.
And so that puts it in full perspective when someone says that and they have a date, but put it in full perspective without a date, because you really don't know the date.
Right.
So just like lean in, do purpose, make an impact, and show up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think the fact is that every day is a gift.
It is a gift.
There's a monk, David.
But we just have to unwrap it. Who gets the Christmas present and doesn't unwrap it?
That's right.
That's what we do when we just walk through the day, not acknowledging that, God, you woke me up that God, you woke me up and you gifted me with this next set of hours.
Yeah.
You've gifted me with the opportunity to talk and share with others. You gifted me. So in that gift, unwrap the gift, unwrap the day.
Right.
Take a moment to inhale, exhale. And even if it's not your favorite season of the year or your favorite weather of the year, you're still embracing that day. And that is what I'm very sensitive to now.
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And it's so true. I mean, I think it's easy for all of us to take our lives for granted and find the things in them that we don't like and focus on those.
Yes.
But the fact is, there is nothing of higher value than a day. Nothing of higher value than a life.
Nothing of higher value. Yes.
Right? There's nothing of higher value. And despite how we might see it sometimes, there's also no strings attached. It's a freely given gift from God.
It's so good.
That we can unwrap it however we want. So that's what a gift is, something that's of high value that's given with no strings attached. Otherwise, it's a payment, right? And so then are we going to be grateful for that gift? which is what brings us happiness?
Yes.
Or are we going to wait till we're happy to try to be grateful? I need to
Right.
have this if-then equation. When I have the right BMW, and when I have
Yeah.
the for my accounting firm, and when I have the right number of books sold,
Yes.
then I'll be happy, right?
You
That's
need
some of
a
the
day
a lot of us
right
saying.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's no, that's really great. So that's great that you've taken that from it, that you've unwrapped
Yeah.
that gift from this
Mhm.
tragedy
Yes.
of making yourself present to the moment and realizing that
Mhm.
each day is a gift, and moving a little bit more intentionally through life and a
Mhm.
little bit slower, in a sense that maybe I was listening to Jay Shetty the other day, and he said if you move slower, you won't get through as much, but it'll have more value.
I love that. That's really good.
Right.
That's really
And
good.
it's
Yeah.
it's been a big part of my life in the last 5 to 10 years about slowing down.
Mhm.
And there's been so many examples of that. I had on my computer, even when I was crazy running big multi-billion dollar businesses, it said there's more to life than increasing its speed, because I was always just
Yeah. Yes.
right, just constantly.
Yes.
And since then, I've had like when I tried to learn to swim, I wanted to do an Ironman and I didn't know how to swim.
Okay.
When I started to swim, it was just flat flailing around, right? Just, I mean, totally, I couldn't even move forward, but I was spending a ton of energy. And I finally hired a coach. Smart thing to do if you want to learn something new.
Learn
Like you did with
something.
the grief. Hey, find somebody who's done it and talk to them, right? And she said, the first thing you need to do is slow down. I want you to go as slow as you can and still keep your body planed off. And the whole thing was, and then she told me this military acronym, right? Slow is steady, steady is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Mm.
And I thought, and it just started to change because I could actually go faster by trying to go slow and burn half as much energy, which I never thought would have been possible before. So I
That's so
also
interesting. Yeah.
slowing down and being more present with it is really, yeah. I think there's a lot to that, and I think that
It
is
is.
really the gift that
Mhm.
you've brought out from this very tough situation. How has that affected your relationships?
I believe that I'm still a work in progress. I'm absolutely a work in progress. And even in
For sure,
slowing
we
down,
all.
there are friends that are like, "Are you kidding me? Slow down, what?" But I am from remarriage. I can remember there's times that I look at things that I know in my first marriage that would have happened, that I've seen happen in my second marriage, that I knew in my first marriage I would have blew up about. And
Right.
now I'm like, you want the shoes in the living room? Keep the shoes in. Are you kidding me? Wherever you want to put the shoes at. And so it just is not. It makes the things that you argue about being remarried a lot less. I have a higher tolerance. I often laugh at myself sometimes because I'm like, my late husband is probably like, what in the world?
Right. Through all this crap, and now she's so nice, you know.
It's all got all this understanding. And so I definitely am a better version of myself as a wife, much more patient because I do understand what is the I've experienced not having that spouse, not having that person to share moments
Mm,
with and memories with and journeys with. So I do try to be more present. Which he will laugh if when he hears this, he'll say, "Are you kidding me? She's on her cell phone. She's still getting 90,000 text messages."
but he maybe didn't have that experience with you before, right?
He didn't. Yeah, where I had probably 3 phones at the year. So,
Right.
so from that standpoint,
And what about with your kids and with your
yes,
employees
that's
and
where
with
I
your
was going to go
community?
next. Certainly with my adult children. Well, all of them are adults. All of them are adults, but my two that were, I'll say my bonus children, that I wasn't the natural birthing mom.
Right.
It has given me, especially my daughter, it's given me an opportunity with her to develop a whole different relationship that I don't think would have um, happened from that standpoint because we have each other now. We've got to figure out how to make this work. And so we've had some really beautiful conversations where she's like, I don't know why I didn't like you before. And she's like, you're really good people to me. And I've gotten to lean into her to say, I first thought you were a monster, but I mean, you're not a monster at
Mm,
all. I see the gifting that you are. And so she can, we're just so in tune now with each other.
mm,
You would have literally at some point thought, oh, she's got to be the biological mom because she can text me and say, what's going on today? And I'm like, whoa, you're not even in the same state with me. And I can text her to say, what's going on and send
right.
something. And so it's given me that there's still a long ways to go, but it's given me a better place from that. And then also, I think the other side of that is my bonus stepson, it takes some time. He's really still trying to grow from and heal from the loss from that standpoint. But now people don't question the motive that I have.
Mhm.
Because if the motive was only their dad, I have a past
Right.
I could have exited a long time ago.
Right.
And
And
I
I
still
think
been.
that's so key with, especially with children relationships, because the motive makes the whole difference, right?
Hmm.
I had a realization in 2019, and this is in one of my earlier podcasts, but where I have two adopted kids and one biological.
Okay. Hmm.
And I realized I was doing all the right things. I was reading them stories and I was hugging on them and loving on them and I was doing all the right things. But I had this realization at the monastery that I was doing it for the wrong reason. I was
Hmm.
doing it like a business goal, sort of like a way, like I needed to pour into my kids because that was the right thing to do so that they would have a good life, so that my life would be perfect because I would have
Hmm.
these perfect kids. And when I realized that, it was heart wrenching. But that our relationship, especially with the older one, reactive attachment disorder, is very difficult. It allowed our relationship to change completely when I changed my heart, my why, my motivation went
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
I need to be seen as successful and have this perfect life, which you're a part of, and I'm going to pour into you because it's going to make my life a certain way.
Yeah.
Instead,
Oh, wow. That's really good.
instead of I see you as a human being and I love you and I don't have any expectation, and yet I'm going to pour into you the best that I can for what's good for you,
Yeah.
not for what's good for me.
Hmm.
So I think that's really beautiful that you have that now
Hmm.
with your
Yeah.
children as well.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
that's
yeah, it's
awesome.
definitely made us all a lot closer. There are still things that I know are triggers for them, for all of them. I mean, yesterday when that parade thing happened, my phone started just heating
Oh,
up
for
because
sure.
they're like, I need to hear from you quickly, and so
Absolutely. I mean, you're they have left, and if you're
yeah,
gone, I mean, oof.
so I have to be very mindful of, okay, I need to check in with them quickly because
Right.
this is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. But I love that you said it's like with the change of your intentions or your reasons, right? It
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. So, wow. With through this all, if you could give one tool to your listeners, how to handle this type of transition, that would really make the most difference. If you could boil it down to one thing, what would you want to give them? What takeaway would you want to give to our listeners today?
My takeaway would be to not spend as much time asking God why, and spend more time saying, God, show me my how. Because
Yeah.
I think when things like this happen, you spend a bunch of time saying, why did he have to die? Why did that happen? Who do I need to sue? What, I mean, you start going through all
Yeah.
these things
Oh
because
yeah.
especially women, because you're trying to fix it, right? You're
Right.
trying to look back. Did I miss a sign? What could I have done differently? And
Right.
that's exhausted energy.
Right.
Because the reality is, you can think of 100 things you could
But
have
it
done
doesn't make
differently,
any difference at
but it
this
makes
point.
zero difference. I
Yeah.
don't care if you think of the best thing you could have done, it makes
Right.
zero difference for where you're at, as opposed to saying, God, show me how I move.
So different. Like one is a closing type of question, and one is an empowering and opening type of question, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. Ask a better question, have a better life,
Yes.
right? So
Absolutely.
ask a better question instead of. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of whys, but as soon as you can move out of the why to how,
Yes.
not
Hmm.
why did this happen, but how can I get through the day? How can I take the next step? How can I get out of bed? How can I go make
Yes.
breakfast for my other kids or whatever the case is?
Whatever the case is, just how. Show me the how.
Mm,
And not being afraid to ask for help when you need help. I have a friend who told me one time, because I had a lot of whys. I wanted
right.
to know, I needed a lot of answers.
Sure. Yeah.
And he said, I think he was exhausted by the amount of whys that I was
Right.
because he was run out of things to say. And I remember him saying, don't park in the hard spots, Marquita. Just don't park in the hard spots. I don't know why.
Right.
You don't know why.
Right.
Move the car, and let's just move the car. Don't park
Right.
in the hard spots.
Right.
And I was like, wow, huh?
Yeah. No,
That's
that's a good point. Don't stop in that space where you're just
yes,
it's an impossible loop and you're stuck in it and it's,
yes, hmm
yeah. Yeah, there's no progress there.
yeah, no
Right.
progress there. And that just so when those hard stops would pop in my head, or visualizations of those final days and moments, I would just say, I can move the car.
Yeah. Oh, I
I can
love
move the
that. I
car.
love that visual too. I'm a car guy, I've
Yeah,
cars
I can
since I
move
was
the
a kid.
car. Let's just move the
Move
car.
the car. Yeah,
Move the
car.
car.
No, I love that. Put it in a different energy field. Put
Yep.
it in a softer
Hmm.
spot or a more
Yep.
comfortable place or a
Hmm.
useful place. Or maybe keep driving for a while.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right. Oh no, that's great. That's great. So really to not get stuck on the why in that situation
Yeah. Don't
and
get stuck
really
there.
ask how. How can I
Hmm.
move forward? How can I take the next step? No,
Yeah.
that's very useful, and I think everyone in this situation will benefit from. Anything else you would like to add before my final question?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to share, and certainly anyone listening. My prayer is that you would glean something from this. That I'm an accountant at heart, so I'd say the return on investment, your ROI. What is your ROI for the time you spent listening to this,
Mm.
and pull something away? And even if I agitated you, why did you listen to this? And
Right.
what is your takeaway that can make you move forward in a different way? Is what I'd say.
Beautiful. And that being said, because you're not just an accountant, you're also a speaker and an author and a mother and a stepmother and
Yeah.
I don't know if a grandmother yet. I don't think so, if I remember
Yes,
right.
yes. My twins have
Grandmother and a
some G
leader of a
babies.
widows group. So where can our listeners find out more about you, Marquita?
So
Where
yeah, so I'm on social media, a hashtag or the at symbol at Marquita M Joshua. See, I had to think about that for a second. We had to change all of that. So Marquita at
and
Marquita
Joshua?
M Joshua. Um, Also, I own Five Star Tax and Biz Solutions, so it's in Kansas City. I'm active on social, active on Facebook, and website marquitajoshua.com or marquitamiller.com. It all leads you to the
All
same
go to the same
place.
place. Okay, great.
So yeah,
Wonderful. Well, I am really honored that you showed up so cleanly and clearly after being through such a tough transition, being willing to share that. And
yes,
hopefully there's a lot of people that can get a lot of benefit from that. And I
yeah,
love your takeaways and that you're also asking our listeners and challenge our listeners, take one thing and do it. It's one thing to have a bunch of knowledge. It's useless if you don't do something with it.
yeah, do
Take
something
one
with it.
thing and do it, then 20 things that just rattle around in your brain.
Right. Yes.
So I really appreciate that. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for
Thank
sharing so
you.
openly about a really tough situation.
Yes. Thank you so very much. I really am honored to be able to do it and count it a privilege. And thank you for all you do.
Thanks, Marquita. I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.